everyone. It's Deborah Poneman, founder of Yes to Success Seminars, where we share knowledge and tools for you to live your ultimate life. And today we're going to talk about one of my absolute favorite subjects, and that is being perfect. Now, according to Brené Brown, author of actually many New York Times bestsellers, including Daring Greatly and Braving the Wilderness. And I think she has a new book that I can't remember the name of, and The Gift of Imperfection. The definition of perfectionism goes something like, perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels the thought, if I look perfect, live perfectly, and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or at least minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, and blame. So Brené goes on to explain that perfectionism is self-destructive simply because there's no such thing as perfect. Perfection is an unattainable goal and is in fact really only about perception. We want to be perceived as perfect, but it's unattainable because it doesn't exist. And there's no way to control other people's perception of you, regardless of how much time and energy you spend trying. And perfectionism is addictive because when we experience being judged or blamed or feeling shame, we often believe it's because we weren't perfect enough. So rather than question the source or the faulty logic of perfectionism, we become even more committed to our mission of living, looking, and doing everything exactly right. So how do we overcome perfectionism? Well, we need to be able to acknowledge our vulnerabilities and practice self-compassion around them. When we become more loving and compassionate with ourselves, and we begin to practice what Brené Brown calls shame resilience, we can then begin to actually embrace our imperfections. And it's in that process of embracing our imperfections that we find out that, or we find our real gifts, our truest gifts, as well as create our most meaningful connections and deepest relationships. So first, I want you to notice the difference between perfectionism and healthy striving. Healthy striving is simply wanting to do a good job for positive reasons and not because you believe that if you're perfect, you can avoid shame, blame, and judgment, all three of which we need to accept as realities of life. So when you find yourself rewriting the report for the fourth or fifth time, ask yourself, am I writing this to do a good job, or am I trying to be perfect in order to avoid shame, blame, or judgment? In other words, God forbid, someone thinking I'm less than perfect. So be honest with yourself. And if the answer is the latter, stop and accept good enough. Just stop and move on. As hard as it is, or you might ask for help. It's that simple. You can, at that moment, also remind yourself that perfection doesn't exist. And even more importantly, no one is going to notice the difference between excellent work and what you think is perfect. No one. You can also remind yourself that the time and energy it takes to go from excellent to unobtainably perfect is not worth your health or your relationships, like with your kids or your partner, who would love to have that half hour with you. Brené Brown also believes that the need to be perfect is what kills creativity. How can you really let your creativity loose when you're afraid to make a mistake? It kills risk-taking for the same reason. If you take a risk, there's always the chance you won't appear perfect. And you can ask anyone who has achieved great things in life, and they will tell you that taking risks was one of the most important components in creating their success. So here's a test. If you see, to see if you fall in the category of perfectionist. So I have this list over here. I'm going to read it. Number 1, you feel compelled to be the best in everything you do, even if it's something you don't care that much about. Okay. Number 2, you're hypercritical and highly conscious of not only your own, but other people's mistakes. 3, you spend much of your time to perfect something, even at the expense of the aforementioned health, well-being, and relationships, like with your family. Next, you tend to set absolute ideals. There's only black and white and no gray. Next, you beat yourself up even when just the smallest little thing goes wrong. Next, you obsessively mull over outcomes over and over in your mind and how you could have done things differently if they didn't turn out perfectly. 7, you're hypersensitive and very defensive towards criticism. So listen to these, see if you see yourself here. 8, you're so obsessed about achieving your goal that you seldom, if ever, enjoy or even notice the journey. Okay, did you see yourself in any of those 8? So if you did, I invite you to let go of the need to be perfect, and maybe for just for a week, try on stopping and accepting good enough, or asking for help, or reminding yourself that perfection doesn't exist. And even more importantly, no one's going to notice the difference between excellent and what you think is perfect. And when you notice yourself on your way from excellent to unobtainably perfect, stop and go and ask your kids if they want to play a game, or go and ask your partner if he or she would like to take a walk, or do something you've been putting off, like watching that Netflix show that everyone is talking about, and you've just been too busy being perfect to watch. And besides, the opposite of perfection isn't imperfection or even mediocrity. It's reality. I send you my love, and I wish you true and balanced and imperfect success. Bye for now.